Hello everyone. Today on the School Snack Series, we are making sweet potato flatbread. A delicious, easy recipe full of amazing gut healthy nutrition to keep your kids healthy, happy, and full. Start by placing two medium-sized yams or sweet potatoes, the orange ones, in a saucepan. Cover with water. Bring to a boil and allow them to cook until they are nice and tender when you pierce them with a fork. While your sweet potatoes are boiling, add 3 tablespoons of whole chia seeds to a coffee grinder or high-speed blender and grind them to a powder. Repeat that same process with 5 tablespoons of whole flax seeds. Using freshly ground seeds in this way ensures that we get the most nutrition from the oils in those seeds and that those oils are not rancid. If you cannot grind your own, then you may use a pre-ground flax and chia seed in this recipe. Once your sweet potatoes are cooked, remove them from the heat, drain them, allow them to cool just enough so that you're able to hold them in your hand and peel the sweet potatoes. You will want them to be still quite warm for this recipe for best results. Next, use a fork to just roughly mash up your yams or your sweet potatoes. Use a measuring cup to make sure you have 2 cups of the mashed yam. So I measured this out into 1 cup increments and then put it into a separate bowl. If you're using 2 medium-sized sweet potatoes, that is roughly equal to 2 cups. But because our sizes of these vegetables vary, it is best to measure it to make sure you have at least the 2 cups. If you have a little extra, that's okay too. In your mixing bowl, continue to mash up your sweet potatoes with your fork until all the big chunks are broken down and you have a fairly smooth sort of yam batter consistency. Next, add your ground flax and ground chia seeds to your sweet potatoes. Add 1 teaspoon of Himalayan rock salt or sea salt and then just mix and mix until you get it nice and well incorporated into a fairly sticky batter at this point. Now is normally the time I would add 2 tablespoons of olive oil to the batter. However, as I was filming this video, I forgot to do it. So if you're watching the video and making it, add 2 tablespoons of olive oil right now. Or you can always hang on and do it like I do a little bit later on in the video as well. You could also be mixing this in a food processor. Just make sure you're pulsing rather than putting it on a continual blend, or you're going to get too soft a batter. It's going to be too worked, and you'll end up with sort of tough flatbread. Once your seeds are completely incorporated, we're going to add in 1/4 cup of cassava flour or cassava flour into the batter. And then, of course, mix that around until it's well incorporated. And you can see as I'm mixing this in and it becomes incorporated into the batter that it's getting thicker, it's getting firmer, but it's still a pretty sticky dough. And that's okay. That's what we want at this point. So just keep mixing it in, keep mixing it up until you get all of that cassava flour completely incorporated into your batter. Then we're going to allow the batter to just sit and rest for about 5 minutes as the seeds and the flour absorb the liquid that's in your yams or sweet potatoes. Now, if you're like me and you forgot to add the oil in earlier, no panic. You can absolutely add it in at this point and everything will be fine. So it's 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Don't do it twice though. Either do 2 tablespoons of olive oil before you add the cassava flour or do it now. You don't want to double up on this. And then of course, just mix it around until you get that all completely incorporated into your batter once again. It's looking good here. Now's the time to test the dough. And mine was still quite sticky, a little too sticky. So I'm going to add in part of another quarter cup of cassava flour, not the whole thing. So this will depend on how much liquid were in your sweet potatoes when you started and how warm they were and other factors. So there is a varied amount that you're going to need here. You might not need it at all. And if you do need it, you may need just a little bit or you may need the whole thing. So measure it out into the quarter cup and then just sprinkle it in a little bit at a time. Incorporate it into your dough and see where that gets you slowly but surely. You are looking for a fairly firm consistency to your dough, but it still needs to be a little bit sticky, a little bit tacky to your fingers. Otherwise, if it's too dry and doesn't stick to your fingers at all, you're going to end up with a really dry flatbread. So you still want a little bit of tackiness in your dough. And then we're going to use oil on our fingers in order to be able to spread them out into little pieces of flatbread. My dough is still just a teensy bit too sticky, so I'm going to add in a little bit more of that quarter cup of cassava flour, and then again, continue to mix. You can see as I'm working this last bit of cassava in how it's starting to get quite a lot firmer, right? Quite a lot drier, but still has a little bit of that tacky consistency to it. So this is exactly what we're looking for. Firm dough, it's kind of forming up into a ball, but it's still going to be a little bit sticky to my fingers when I try and pick it up. And to test it out again with my fingers, so I'm just going to dive in there and grab off a chunk, and you can see there that it's sticking to my fingers. That's okay. We do want it to be a little bit sticky still for a nice moist flatbread. Next, you're going to line a baking sheet with parchment paper and drizzle with about a tablespoon of avocado oil. You could use olive oil, but avocado oil is preferable because we will be cooking these at quite a high temperature. And then you're just going to smooth it around using your hands. Make sure that the whole surface of your parchment paper on the cookie sheet is completely covered. And then I zhuzh it around on my fingers so that when I grab a ball of dough, I'm able to flatten it with my fingers without it sticking. Depending what size you want for your flatbread, this is about a tablespoon, a large tablespoon of batter, and then I flatten it between my fingers and place it on the cookie sheet and continue to flatten it out. And this makes sort of a small tortilla, so sort of like a small street taco style tortilla. You could make them larger if you wanted to, and you can also make them smaller. So I sometimes make them smaller into almost like just a little small cookie size as well. And those are easy to take in the lunch kit. So depending on what you want to do with these, you can play around with the size. You can see that the batter is still quite sticky. I'm showing you they're kind of elastic, but as long as you've got a good amount of oil on your hands, they shouldn't stick. If it does start to, just get a little bit more of that oil on your hands and continue pressing these out until you have finished up with all of your batter. Depending on what size you're making, you may need to use more than one cookie sheet to finish off all of your sweet potato batter. You can see here that I have some smaller, more bite-sized flatbreads as well as the larger taco size flatbreads. Size completely up to you. Just make sure that they're thin enough that they will cook through in the middle. Otherwise, you'll end up with kind of a soggy texture in the middle. So you want them to be, about a quarter of an inch thick at the most. Okay, so once you've got all of your batter out onto your cookie sheet, or you've taken up all your space on your cookie sheet, whichever comes first, you're going to slip these into the oven at 425 degrees. So 425 degrees on the middle rack. And if you have a convection bake, that's even better. They're going to cook quickly, so set your timer for about 5 minutes, and then you're going to check in on your flatbread. Remove them from the oven, give them a flip, and then return them to the oven for another 5 minutes on each side or until they're starting to puff a little bit in the center. You're looking for your flatbread to be nice and golden brown, but have a nice flexible consistency and a soft sort of chew to the center. You can see these are nice and soft and chewy, and they are simply delicious fresh out of the oven, or keep them in the fridge for up to a week. You could also batch cook these, make a big batch and keep them in the freezer. They would keep well for about 3 months. They travel super well, which makes them the ideal school snack for your kiddos to pack those lunch kits full of nutrient density that your kids are going to love, keep you on track to improving your kids' health. Don't forget to get your free downloadable copy of this and all the School Snack Series recipes by joining the free community over on Kids Health Revolution website, www.kidshealthrevolution.com. Look forward to seeing you again very soon with another School Snack Series recipe.